Welcome to Arts in the City. I'm Magalie Laguerre-Wilkinson. We are in a Halloween mood today. If you've got that holiday spirit but are not that into costumes or candy, why not try a New York City ghost tour? Beth Kovetz has the spooky tale.
A ghost tour is about 2 hours of an expert guide passionately retelling true accounts of ghostly and macabre historical happenings here in New York City.
Janes runs Burrows of the Dead, a company dedicated to sharing the spookiest parts of New York City. One of her tours centers on the beautiful and seemingly peaceful Washington Square Park.
Whenever you're walking through this bucolic, pastoral, green, shady setting, you kind of forget for a moment that you're walking on top of 20,000 corpses.
From 1797 to 1825, Washington Square Park was a public burial ground, or potter's field.
Yellow fever had a tendency to visit New York pretty regularly. In the 1790s, we lost about 6% of our population. The city at that point is quite small. It's mostly south of Chambers Street. After a while, the Common Council realized they needed a place to put all these bodies. And this was the perfect spot. Now, I can't think of a better foundational myth for a spooky spot than a forgotten, abandoned graveyard. And there is even a native Indian element to it as well, because the swamp was fed by the Minetta stream, and the Minetta is actually an ancient monster of Lenape legend. And apparently the Lenape hypothesized that once upon a time, in the beginning of the world, in the beginning of Manhattan, this ancient creature lived in Minetta Creek. And the Minetta monster had to be banished to the sea in order to make room for human life and habitation here on Manhattan.
Even the trees of Washington Square Park have spooky stories.
This is the Hangman's Elm. According to legend, this is where they used to execute criminals by hanging. It has been said that on the heavy branches of this elm tree have snapped the necks of dozens of highwaymen and criminals, that this was the sort of place of all places for hangings and public executions in 18th century, 19th century New York.
Public hangings were plentiful near the park in early New York. Janes is quick to point out that this tree, the oldest living tree in Manhattan, was privately owned in that period, and therefore most likely innocent of all the murderous deeds attributed to it.
So, you know, you get these rumors because it looks so old. It is so old, and it has seen so many things, and it looks so ominous. The tour guide's job is to gather and recount these myths and legends and these ghostly tales with mostly New Yorkers, actually.
80 to 90% of Jane's guests are locals looking to find out a little more about the history of the city they live in.
And if the ghoulish thing is not for you, there are wonderful graveyard tours looking at the patriotic history of our city.
The graveyards of Lower Manhattan are filled with the headstones of major Revolutionary War heroes.
With the new musical on Broadway, everybody's talking about Alexander Hamilton. He's very popular, and this is his final resting place. At that time, the Vice President of the United States, Aaron Burr, also from New York, ran for governor of New York. And he heard that Hamilton was spreading rumors about his moral character, as he called it. Eventually, Burr challenged Hamilton to a duel. Mr. Hamilton accepted, which is really kind of amazing when you think about it, because a year or two before, his oldest son had been killed in a duel here in New York, which made dueling illegal in New York. Hamilton was shot and he died as a result of that wound. He was 47 when he died in the duel. Burr's life was ruined as a result of the duel, but really fascinating is his wife. She lived to be 97 years old. She never remarried. She raised their remaining 7 children, and she asked in death that they be reunited, and she is interred here in the vault in front of his grave, Eliza Schuyler Hamilton.
And I think you get a better sense of the reality of someone when you're actually standing there where, you know, they're eternally resting.
From Lower Manhattan, this has been Beth Kovetz for Arts in the City.
Al Hirschfeld was known as the Line King. A master of his craft, Hirschfeld used only a pen and ink to redefine the art form called caricature.
When we think of caricature, we think of something pejorative, a put-down. We think of gross anatomical distortion and big heads, little bodies. And he didn't do any of those things. He really interpreted. He was a visual journalist who had a distinct point of view and a style of drawing.
More than 100 original works by Al Hirschfeld are now on display at the New York Historical Society in a retrospective entitled The Hirschfeld Century, Organized by the late artist's close friend and personal archivist, David Leopold, the exhibition guides you through the various stages of Hirschfeld's storied career.
He actually got his start in movie studios in 1920. He got hired as a gopher for Goldwyn Pictures, and in his spare time he did drawings of academic portraits, what he would later call eye, ear, nose, and throat portraits of some of their stars. And one night, Howard Dietz, who was the publicity director, fished one of those out of a trash can and published it. And that was really the beginning of Hirschfeld's career.
Hirschfeld spent the next 8 years doing odd jobs in the art departments of various film studios, living in Paris briefly, and drawing caricatures of the theater for several New York-based newspapers, until he got his big break.
Then in January 1928, he got a telegram from the New York Times with it was signed Zoloto. And Hirschfeld thought it was a prank by his friends because that is a crazy name. Well, the assignments editor of the New York Times was a guy by the name of Sam Zoloto, and he started doing drawings for them, and that would go on for 75 years. His style came in of all places, the island of Bali in 1932, when the sun was so bright it bleached out all the color, and all he saw were black and white line drawings walking around. And he said that his love affair with lines started then, and he was interested in image and pure line. He preferred black and white because not only did it say what he wanted to say, but he knew that it reproduced better than anything else.
Hirschfeld's drawings quickly became a staple in the Sunday New York Times. Broadway's and Hollywood's biggest stars dreamed of being immortalized as a Hirschfeld. Some of his most iconic works are shown here, including Charlie Chaplin, Sidney Poitier, Lucille Ball, and Woody Allen and Diane Keaton in Annie Hall.
Hirschfeld's career was over 75 years and was a crucial part of the experience for not just the people in the theater, but for everybody. More people knew about the theater in the 20th century, what was going on Broadway, because of Hirschfeld's drawings, because even if you weren't interested in the theater, you were interested to see what Hirschfeld was doing, or you wanted to count Nina's. Nina really entered the picture in November 1945. When she was born. Al's lucky number was 9, and they had decided that if it was a girl, they would name her Nina. Well, fortunately for all of us, it was a girl. And after Hirschfeld made sure that his wife was okay and that his new baby daughter had 10 toes and 10 fingers, he went back to his studio and did what he always did. In good times or in bad times, he drew. And for the next couple of weeks, he found different ways to include Nina in the drawing. Well, he stopped doing it after a couple of weeks, and people started writing in saying, spent all day Sunday looking for Nina, where is it? And the mail was so much, he realized, well, he needed to keep doing it because it was easier than answering all the mail.
From then on, Hirschfeld incorporated Nina's into almost all of the caricatures he drew for the Times. The number next to his signature indicated how many times the name would appear in each drawing. Also featured is a replica of the barber chair that Al famously drew all those Ninas in.
Al thought that the barber chair was the last functional chair in America. He said it went up and down, it swiveled, and when you wanted to rest, it could turn into a chaise lounge. And although the man was covered with hair, big white beard and rather long hair for a man his age, one would think that he never was in a barber chair, and yet he spent every day. It was in his studio, and he worked. Literally all of his drawings were done sitting in a barber chair.
The exhibition not only serves as a tribute to his life, but also as a reminder of how ubiquitous the lines his pen created are.
His career is so remarkable, if nothing else besides the time, and that he was such an active participant, not only recording what he did, what was going on, and recording what we've done, really, what the performing arts have done, but also he helped to define it. His drawings, whether they were of Laurel and Hardy or Carol Channing, or many, many others, are the image that we remember much more than the people themselves.
Carol Ann Riddell for Arts in the City.
Ernabel Demillo showcases a filmmaker whose tragic personal journey mirrors the one depicted in her film.
Sometimes it's the little stories, the shorts, that make the biggest impact.
This is the story of Janice, a recovering addict in a custody battle with her ex-husband for their daughter Grace. This powerful short film is taking the independent film circuit by storm. And for the filmmaker behind it all, it's personal. The story of addiction and recovery is based on her real-life experience.
I never really set out to write a film, and it was the story that came to me. I had been writing through my whole time being clean, kind of in a therapeutic way, about how I started using. And I had an acting teacher that gave us a charge and a call to action, like everybody has a story to tell, go out, write it, stop waiting for the phone to ring.
Meet Marisa Vitali, a Long Island native and actress who wrote, produced, and starred in Grace.
Hey, Janice, sweetie. You're going to have to hang for the rest of the day.
Impossible, Johnny, not happening today.
I met with Vitali at the recent Long Island International Film Expo, where Grace won the Audience Award for Best Short Film. The film's timely theme has resonated with audience members and critics. The short, just 14 minutes long, also won Best Drama at the Cape Fear Festival and was nominee for Best Short Film at the Soho International Film Fest. It was also a featured selection at Cannes, Spirit Quest, and the upcoming Golden Door and Real Recovery festivals.
The part that brings me the most joy is that, you know, the conversations that it starts. And people will come up to me that I never met before, and they'll kind of share their experience with addiction and recovery and how they were touched by it and how they were moved by it. And to me, that brings me the most joy. And I feel like the film has kind of achieved what we set out to do. So in having those conversations, it just kind of gives confirmation that there is a need and a desire to have this conversation.
Vitali grew up in Long Island with dreams of becoming an actor. It was while she was attending NYU that her downward spiral with heroin began.
Marisa, can you tell us about your personal journey?
I started going to clubs when I was at school at NYU in the city, and it just kind of progressed from there, and just like one thing led to the next, and I started using heroin, and I can say, like, I always thought that, like, oh, I'll never do that, that's not for me, and I tried it, and it was amazing, and I just kind of ran with it and didn't really realize that I was addicted till like about 6 months in.
She has been clean for 13 and a half years. The film is loosely based on her first year of recovery and is set in the same Long Island diner in Northport where she worked. The setting, she says, was non-negotiable.
For me, I felt that that was the most difficult time. I just felt so raw and so vulnerable with nothing to hide behind. And, you know, having to face people that I went to high school with, or old teachers or family friends, and, you know, just the awkwardness of those conversations and explanations. And so for me, that was really the inspiration of Grace. And so I was just so grateful to be able to actually shoot it in that location.
It took 4 years from conception to final product to bring the story to life. Vitali, an actress by training, says working on Grace was like going to film school. And after the film was made, came the hard part, getting the film noticed. And that's where the film festivals help, a place where filmmakers can break through Hollywood's glass ceiling.
You can, like, break through the wall. You don't have to hit it. So if they say you're a female filmmaker and it's a harder time or whatever, that you make your own movie. Nothing can stop you if you're willing to work hard enough to do it. So I think that's where everything becomes equal. You know, it's just kind of a wonderful thing.
Deborah Markowitz is co-director of the Long Island Film Fest and is herself a filmmaker. Vitali's short, she says, really struck a chord with the audience.
You know, everybody knows somebody who knows somebody, if they're not themselves addicted, knows somebody that is, and how heartbreaking it is. It was very touching. It was very heartfelt. How do you make that decision? Again, you're on the cusp of, do I lose my job? I lose my daughter. I don't go to court. I lose my daughter. You know, I mean, I'm getting chills just thinking about it.
Meanwhile, for Vitali, she is humbled by all the attention.
I just turn it over to everyone that's really been a part of it and has really cheered it on. And I truly believe that it's for every person living in recovery or who has struggled with addiction. And so I'm just so grateful that I can be able to share it with all of them.
Vitali is now working to turn Grace the movie into a full-length feature film. In the meantime, if you want to catch her short, you can log on to her website, gracethemovie.com, for upcoming screenings, including one coming up right here at the Cinema Village. I'm Ernabel Demillo for Arts in the City.
Now, on to one of the unique voices in theater today. Rajiv Joseph became a household name in the theater world after the success of his Pulitzer Prize-nominated play, Bengal Tiger at the Baghdad Zoo. But that wasn't always his plan. He fell into playwriting by accident. What he really wanted to do was write novels, and it was a good thing for theatergoers that never took.
I wrote a screenplay and I was admitted into the dramatic writing program at NYU to be a screenwriter, but that program was both for screenwriting and playwriting. And so once I was there, I started taking the playwriting classes. I started going to see more straight contemporary plays that I hadn't really seen a lot growing up, and that really changed me.
Joseph's most recent play, Guards at the Taj, is about two men guarding the Taj Mahal in the year 1648 who have to do the unthinkable to please their ruler. It's also emblematic of Joseph's range.
This is about two guys who grew up together, they're best friends, and they experience this event that changes them, and because they react to it very differently, it changes their relationship. As you're writing a piece of drama, you're looking for the moments of conflict, the moments where something that was intact shatters, and so different points of view have to be kind of extrapolated from that. And so again, it's also a way of thinking about any kind of idea is like, and which is great about theater and drama, is that you the writer, can occupy two different points of view and argue with yourself.
His unusual path to playwriting took him to Senegal, where he spent over 3 years with the Peace Corps. Joseph says his time there informed his writing.
My language skills were very minimal when I first got there, and you struggle to make connections with people. So my therapy was really going back to my hut and, writing in my journal, like writing to myself, trying to process this kind of insane experience. And so that got me into a rhythm and a routine of writing that I had not yet had before. And so that kind of, just practically speaking, made me a better writer. But I think as it pertains to the plays that I write, I enjoy telling stories and having characters that are very far-flung globally. I think being in Senegal opened my eyes and also my heart to different cultures and different people, and also gave me the confidence to be able to sort of at least attempt to inhabit their point of view.
Joseph's own bicultural background was also a source of inspiration. With a mother from Cleveland, Ohio, where he grew up, and a father from India, Joseph's imagination didn't always have to go very far.
I was always really interested in my dad's story about coming here, being an immigrant. My very first play was inspired by a story of his that he had when he first came to college here in the States. And so...
What was that?
It was a story about how he had to take an American literature class, even though he was a business student. And he got this assignment, and it said, compare and contrast Huck and Holden's journeys down the river of life. And it was, of course, Huckleberry Finn and Holden Caulfield, but they didn't mention the titles of the book. I think he had lost his syllabus or whatever, but so he spent his whole week looking for this book called Huck and Holden, and he couldn't find it, and he couldn't do the homework. And then, his professor was kind and helped him out, and then he read these two books, and they changed his life. It was his entry into American literature and culture, and what made him kind of, two of the things that kind of made him fall in love with America.
And if you were to ask Joseph how he prefers to define his material, he'll say it leans towards social consciousness.
I think there's a certain sensibility that I have, that I think I bring to my plays, that involves the humanist way of dealing with savage situations. I feel like a lot of my plays, end with some act of forgiveness, which is important to me as a person, as a writer.
Rajiv Joseph's Guards at the Taj is currently touring the West Coast.
I'm Mike Gilliam at Book Expo America at the Jacob Javits Convention Center. We're talking to the author of a fascinating book about Edwin Land. He's the creator of the Polaroid camera. It's called A Triumph of Genius.
There you go. Enjoy it, sir.
His name is Ron Fierstein, a patent attorney, music agent for some big-name stars, including Suzanne Vega and Sean Colvin, and co-producer of the Broadway hit Kinky Boots. He's also actor Harvey Fierstein's brother, and now the author of a biography about the inventor of the Polaroid camera, Edwin Land.
He's one of America's great technologists that no one has ever heard of. He died third on the list of American inventors behind Thomas Edison and one of Edison's colleagues, and yet no one has ever heard of him.
Fierstein got to know Land when he was a patent attorney working on a blockbuster lawsuit, the battle between Polaroid and Eastman Kodak over instant photography technology invented by Edwin Land.
I helped train him as a witness and helped write his testimony during the trial, and became more and more impressed with his life story and the man himself, and I put it on my bucket list. I always thought it was a really fascinating story, together with the story of the two companies, Polaroid and Kodak. You know, they had worked closely together for decades, and they went from being protege mentor to arch enemies over about 60 years, and that was a fascinating story as well. And so I thought the combination of those two would make a great book someday.
Research and writing took about 6 years. The book begins with Land's early years inventing what would become the polarized lens.
Started working on it in high school. When he enrolled at Harvard, he continued to work on it, but in fact dropped out after his first year to completely devote himself to the problem of finding a practical polarizer. When he was 19 years old, he solved it and came up with a thin piece of plastic in which he was able to embed microscopic crystals in a particular array that allowed this thin piece of plastic to polarize light, to take the glare out of bright light.
And those are my sunglasses?
Those are your sunglasses, those are your LED screens.
Land went back to school but would leave again without ever getting his degree, much like Apple founder Steve Jobs. He took one of his professors and started his first company. Later, another company was started that made many products, including polarized goggles for World War II. The company is Polaroid. After a day of taking pictures of his daughter with his Kodak camera, Land went to the pharmacy to have the film developed, a process that took weeks back then. That's when his daughter said something to him that changed photography forever.
Daddy, why can't I see the pictures now?
Land ran with the idea and created the first camera that gave you a print in minutes. He maintained his relationship with Kodak and even had them produce the film for his instant camera. That worked well for years because Kodak viewed the Polaroid as a niche item. It didn't threaten their film business. That all changed in 1968, though, when Land developed the prototype for the SX70 camera.
This was to be the first instant photograph that would emerge from the camera and develop in your hand, and you didn't have to do anything else.
Fierstein says that frightened the people at Kodak, prompting them to develop a similar camera, which set off years of litigation and an amazing trial and settlement that is all detailed in the book. Once again, the book is A Triumph of Genius by Ron Fierstein. It's a fascinating read. I'm Mike Gilliam for Arts in the City.
In this month's Hidden Gems of New York, we show you one of New York City's newest attractions that every member of the family will enjoy. It's the SeaGlass Carousel.
Manhattan's newest treasure resides in the Battery, the area once known as Battery Park at the southern tip of Manhattan. The SeaGlass Carousel opened in August and has been dazzling its riders ever since. The shell-like structure of the building that houses it draws passers-by to its full-length glass walls, where they can peer into an underwater landscape. The New York Aquarium, which was located in the Battery from 1896 to 1941, served as inspiration for the marine environment. Its design was planned so that it would not resemble the other famous New York City carousels like the Central Park Carousel. Instead of horses, there are 12 different species of fish that glow to imitate bioluminescence. Instead of a pole that the fish spin around, there are electric motors underneath the floor that generate independent movements of each fish. And instead of carnival music, there are dreamlike renditions of well-known classical tunes. The project took about 10 years and $16 million to complete, but it's well worth the wait. The SeaGlass Carousel is open 7 days a week from 10 a.m. to 10 p.m.
Halloween makes it a busy time for Hugh McMahon. He's been carving elaborate pumpkin designs for decades. Donna Hanover joined him at Chelsea Market to watch the sculptor at work.
How did you get started as a pumpkin carver?
Well, I first started for fun, where I did it for family and friends, made some carvings, and then I took some photographs of those, and I said, well, why don't I show those around? And in the first year, I did it for Studio 54 and some restaurants and so forth in New York, and I decided that this might be a way to go. Well, your first thing is you want to get a water-soluble magic marker, something that you can wipe off after you make a drawing. And so what I'm going to do is you do a little sketch of your idea. Now we're going to do a scary cat design. I call it the cat witch. I'm working on different types of levels. So I take the fruit and vegetable knife and cut out the pop-out. And then I cut this and cut in for the basic cuts. And then I come with my X-Acto knife and I cut into the skin where I don't go all the way through. And so you have different dimensions when you put the light in there, and it'll have a nice effect.
How many pumpkins do you carve per day?
That's hard to say, in that I can personally carve maybe, depending on subject matter, 10 a day. If I have to do portraits, I could do maybe 5 portraits a day. But also, when I'm doing large events and parties, I bring in assistant pumpkin carvers, and we could have a big group, as much as 10 carvers working at one time. I've done all the, what you call the Halloween divas. Heidi Klum portrait, Kim Kardashian, Bette Midler, and these are ladies who are known to have Halloween parties almost every year. And also Mariah Carey, I did a portrait of her as well. I've done Obama a number of times, and Kerry, and when they're up, and McCain.
What is the best way to illuminate?
The best way to illuminate is to take a light bulb and place it in the side like so, and then you get a nice glow. And then also, when I put the light bulb in, then I finish the carving. I'm seeing how it looks in light.
You said this is a light sculpture. That's how you view this?
In the end, I consider it a light sculpture, where I looked at it in the light and made the final decision that it's going to work because of the light.
How to carve it exactly.
How it's reacting to the light is very important in the way I carve. So, Donna, I've been working on a special pumpkin here. I'd like to get your opinion.
Okay. I'm honored. Do you think it looks like me? I do think it looks like me.
I think a little. I hope so.
I love it. I love it.
That's our show for today. For more information on any of our stories or to watch them anytime, make sure to visit our website at the link below. I'm Magalie Laguerre-Wilkinson, and thanks for watching Arts in the City.